I want to start this segment. We have a lot of important stuff to discuss, but I want to start the segment with a video that I really, honestly, to be frank with you, struggle to watch because it reminds me of what we did so wrong collectively as a country. But something that is mentioned in this clip is such an utter lie. We need to dive into it, bringing the receipts. So here it is, flashing us back to the debate. Here we go.
What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump, will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do.
And there you're hearing Trump. He said it so many times on the campaign trail, dozens and dozens. I know nothing about Project 2025. Oh, that's nothing to do with me. And now to discuss whether or not that's true, I think you know the answer. I want to bring in Brittany Page. You can find her on YouTube at the Page Perspective. Brittany, great to be with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Luke.
So, America really bought into that. Because I think if individual Americans, actually you saw this in the polls, get asked about what's laid out in Project 2025, they pretty, disproportionately say, no, I don't want that. Right. But Trump went around saying that's not actually my agenda. Right. Believe me. What's the truth?
Well, the truth is that Donald Trump knows nothing about Project 2025. No, I'm kidding. Can you imagine? Because I'm sitting in like the grudge seat, the Isabella Moody seat, and I just want everyone to know that I am not that, okay? I know I have highlights, but it's not that situation, okay? No, obviously he was lying, and it is disappointing to see this clip because it's what we could have had, right? Project 2025 from the Heritage Foundation, the 900-page handbook, Mandate for Leadership, it detailed the steps for the next conservative president to take, and Donald Trump has very obviously taken those steps, not only in the fact that Russell Vogt, I'm sorry, every time I want to say his name, because it looks like Vogt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Vogt. I didn't even know that.
It is Vogt, yeah. The principal author of Project 2025 and director of the Office of Management and Budget in the first term, but also in the second term. Mm-hmm. And now we're also hearing, according to Politico, that Paul Dans, he was the director of Project 2025 for the Heritage Foundation. He's saying Donald Trump is just going all in implementing Project 2025, that he could not be more pleased with Donald Trump implementing what he has from Project 2025.
Yeah, I mean, right when Trump won, which again makes watching that back this much more insane, all of the supporters of Trump started posting, haha, yeah, actually, we do like Project 25. Yes, that is going to be what happens. And I have to be honest, I don't know if this is portraying myself to be naive, but I've been shocked at how aggressively they've done that because it seemed even too draconian for Trump. But what happens with him is regardless of his ideological, I think he ideologically buys into this stuff, but regardless of it, he also will just hand power to people, hand it over to Russ Vogt and hand it over to Elon Musk and all these folks. And now they're just line by line implementing it. If you'll go through sort of what that means, what logistically they're doing that resemble exactly what was laid out there and we knew about and she was warning about it, and they were, I won't say the word, it's overused, but starts with a G and ends with ass lighting us over and over again.
I mean, politicizing the government at every level, which we're seeing, right? They're forcing out people of every federal agency and replacing them with people that are going to be loyal to Donald Trump. I mean, that's even happening at the Justice Department. It's disturbing when you know that they were telling you in advance that they were going to do that, that was the plan. We're going to fire all these people. We're going to get rid of the federal workforce. We're going to replace them with Trump loyalists. And then every day we seemingly wake up to a new headline that is happening. The attacks on LGBTQ folks, that was in Project 2025. The attacks on DEI, DEIA, that was in Project 2025. They want to go after abortion rights, mass deportations, that was in Project 2025. I mean, take a headline of what Donald Trump has been doing. That was in Project 2025.
Yeah.
So this new Politico article coming out with Paul Dans, he was kind of considered a sacrificial lamb because he had to resign during the campaign when Donald Trump, like in that clip, was denying knowledge of Project 2025 and it was becoming unpopular for him to be associated with it. Paul Dans, the director of Project 2025 with Heritage Foundation, he had to resign because they didn't want Trump to be associated with it. But now he's saying, and this is from Politico, quote, Dans effectively confirmed what Democrats were saying all along, and Trump himself denied. There really is almost no difference between Project 2025 and what Trump was planning all along and is now implementing. And if the White House were to call, he'd be glad to be back on the team. It's actually way beyond my wildest dreams, Dan said. It's not going to be the easiest road to hoe going forward. The deep state is going to get its breath back, but the way that they've been able to move and upset the orthodoxy and at the same time really capture the imagination of the people, I think portends a great 4 years.
Just utter excitement from the people who worked to craft something that, and this is what makes me just mad at us as a country, that people don't want on its face, but then can be duped into supporting. And just recently, a big part of it too is believing, and I think this roots sort of itself in a belief that democracy ultimately will become an untenable way to implement their policy goals because the majority is going to drift further and further away from supporting their individual policy objectives. And so with you see this unitary executive theory, the underlying belief here is that we got to centralize power to the presidency so that we can do a lot of the stuff that with the broader checks and balances may not be possible. And we have to do it quickly enough that we don't get voted out of power before we're able to actually implement the worst of these things. Did you hear, just sort of separately, Trump openly, it's something, again, he ran on, but it's shocking some people, openly calling CNN, MSNBC illegal, and at the DOJ speech, something that I have not seen the necessary media coverage of, just declaring them in front of the very people who would target them as enemies and illegal, and then simultaneously saying it's illegal to criticize judges that he likes.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's scary because Republicans aren't coming out and saying anything in response to this. And I think at least in the first term, we had some Republicans coming forward and saying, okay, he's pushing the boundaries right now. We don't approve of what he said. We don't approve of what he's doing, right? What Republicans are there that are coming forward and saying that now? There's none. And again, this was the warning from Kamala Harris in this clip from Democrats before the election. They learned their lesson from the first term, and they made the changes necessary to ensure that the second term is going to wreak havoc on the rest of us and be exactly what they want.
You know, in thinking about this, one of the things that I think is causing anger towards Chuck Schumer, he's kind of the lightning rod for this, but it's a bigger problem, is in this case, it feels like for bad objectives, there's an aggressiveness. There's an energy that the Republican Party has to actually do the stuff. We hate it, but they're doing the stuff that they wanted to do. I heard someone ask this, where is the Project 2025 of Democrats? Totally. They would not have any of those things, but really comprehensively lay out. And I think that's one thing that, as I assess more and more Kamala Harris's loss, that was a mistake of hers, is she presented a vision contrary to Trump's that was much better, obviously. It didn't have, though, the sort of generational change. We're going to actually do something foundational here. It felt like a little bit, it would be changes around the edges. Status quo would mainly be unaffected.
Right.
And do you agree, and then do you have any leaders that come to mind, if you do, that the Democratic Party, if they're going to actually oppose and then govern with the level of urgency that's going to be needed if they're able to win after a Trump presidency, need to have a much more aggressive and systemic set of policy proposals that would that would be sort of not draconian and terrible and in violation of democratic principles, but the energy that we're seeing from the Project 2025 people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's very important for Democrats to have policy positions that will improve people's lives, that get people excited. We hear a lot from Democrats, and this is not something we often hear from Republicans. They'll say, we need a strong opposition. We need a strong Republican Party. And how strange it is to constantly talk about how you need like the opposition to your stated policy goals to be strong. If what you are offering is good, then you feel like everyone should be on board, right? You don't need a party fighting that. You don't need an opposition fighting that, you know? So yeah, I think it's important that they have stated goals. Quit trying to do this thing where we're in the middle and the Republicans are always leading the conversation. Why are they leading the conversation? We need to be leading the conversation. We need to be offering something as an alternative. And to answer your question about who I think is a good leader right now, certainly AOC is a great leader. And I know in that poll that they recently did, asking Democrats who, they prefer, she was at the top of the list, even though it was just like 10%, I believe. So it's, there's still not unity as far as who the next leader could be.
Yeah.
But AOC, Bernie Sanders going on this Fight the Oligarchy tour, that is very important. I think class solidarity is certainly something that we need to talk more about.
Yeah.
And lean into in the Democratic Party.
Yeah. That's been my big takeaway. I don't know if AOC's moment is now. We talked about this before the show, but I do think that if it's Trump, the wrecking ball, and then, hey, we'll come and like put a couple screws in, it's like the whole house was knocked down. So we need more than that. And yeah. I do really find as the unifying message, us versus the oligarchy. That messaging, because it's true, and because it taps into something that crosses partisan barriers and identity barriers and leaving behind some of the debates of the past, at least for the time being, to narrow in on this is a fundamental battle of all of us and a limited set of people who are rigging the system against us. And Trump, while he positioned himself as this populist hero, is actually, to an unprecedented degree, exacerbating the power of that very group.
Absolutely.
And wanting to push through right now insane tax cuts. And what do you think happens when you unravel all of the institutions, the National Labor Relations Board, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, FTC recently, and he's pushing out anyone that would disagree and just shutting down agencies altogether that are the ones that check the power,
right. Right.
And it's crazy. It's similar to how he positioned himself as, I'm not for Project 25. People believed him and they were so wrong. People believed him that he's fighting for them. Some people,
people believe him now.
People now think,
yeah.
And in reality, he is the very elite.
Absolutely.
That they acted like they're fighting against.
Absolutely.
Which does make me wonder this is a whole different thing, but to the people who still think he's doing a great job, what do they think he's doing?
Well, I mean, and we're even seeing this in the different responses to people that are personally negatively impacted by Donald Trump and his actions, right? Mm-hmm. There was a recent case of someone whose wife, I believe, got, caught up with ICE and is facing possible deportation, and he still said he would vote for Trump. And so what do you do with someone like that who's actually experiencing the negative ramifications of Donald Trump's policies, who is like, yeah, I'd do it again. Mm-hmm. F my wife, I guess. I don't know. It's disturbing, and I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah. All right. You want to remind people where they can find you?
Yes, I am Brittany Page on YouTube. I host The Page Perspective, and I would love for you to visit me there.